lounging, son.
Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and with me today I have really awesome indie cartoonist. I have Paul Kortjohn with me, and I'm really excited to have you on, dude. I really dug the stuff that you've sent me. I first discovered you through the Washed Up Midlife Turtles, and then you also recently sent me this book, The Not Spawn. So really excited, and then I sorry that I didn't pick up get more stuff from you, because I know you have a lot of stuff on your site. So I'm super stoked to get into it with you about all things comics. But first off, let's talk how you got into comics. Like, what started your love for the medium?
I mean, just as a kid growing up in that sweet spot of the Tim Burton Batman movie, you see that, you want to know what's going on. So you get into Batman comics, and there's the X-Men cartoon. And then, of course, your interest kind of wanes in that. And once again, I lucked out, and I was old enough to start going to public libraries whenever I wanted. And they started to get the beginning of the trade paperbacks and stuff, but of the non-superhero stuff. So that kind of held my interest and pushed me further in it. But for as long as I can remember, I'd save the Sunday comics and the everyday section from the local paper. Just any sort of comic that I could get my hands on. I wasn't too choosy, because there wasn't really a comic shop nearby that I knew of or could get a ride to. So I kind of had to take whatever found its way to me,
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like we're probably around the same age, I would imagine. So were they, like, I know for me, like, I got them I think the first comic I got, actually, my mom grabbed them for me, so I don't remember. But, like, I know they were in grocery stores, and a lot more readily. You know what I mean? Like, there was a lot more. They were easier to find, I would say, rather.
The big thing I would get is you could get the 3-packs.
Yeah.
At gas stations, where you'd of course get probably an X-Force number 1 or 2 as the freebie, probably an X-Men number 1. But usually sandwiched in the middle, there'd be something you probably hadn't seen, which probably the strongest memory I have as a kid's, kind of opening up to the world of comics was from that, where, on the outside it's X-Force. Don't know what that is, but it's got an X in it, so I'm into that.
Yeah.
Other side, Wolverine doing something. And when I opened it up, there was the die-cut Punisher Warzone number 1. Yeah. And I remember just staring at this thing, because I'd never seen the Punisher up until that point. And that just sticks out in my mind as a really strong sort of like, oh, I need to know more about this. Because if you remember that cover, it's pretty striking. It's not even like it's a full figure. It's this kind of oddly cropped image of 2/3 of Frank from this way, with what as a kid you think is a real gun. And I think he did use photo reference for really, he wanted to not do the Rob Liefeld gun, so it's just bullet casings, a giant skull, and spit, I think, even coming out of his mouth. But yeah, I'd get those 3-packs you'd get from like a 7-Eleven or a Shell. Of course, like you said, supermarkets would have comics. But, of course, you have to be choosy with your kid dollars when you don't have a job. And for whatever reason, if it didn't have like a really intense cover, like Wolverine or Batman were a safe one, Mad Magazine would draw my interest, because you open that up and it's stuff you're not going to see in Marvel and DC. Nothing too bad, really. But when you're a kid and you kind of start to cotton on that, even though Batman's punching people in the face, depending on if it's a normal artist, there's not gobs of blood or teeth, or when Wolverine goes and slashes someone, it just cuts their clothes. But in Mad Magazine, you could get Spy versus Spy, where there's skulls and dismemberment and guts, and of course all other kinds of fun stuff. So that'd be where I get my comics, or thrift stores. But you never knew what you got, because I don't know if this was your usual trip to the thrift stores. You'd never see the cover. It would always be some ratty old yellowed book, usually like DC 70s, Marvel 70s, but either missing pages or covers completely ripped off and water damaged.
when I was younger, like the hospital, like where my little brother was born, they had like these like used books area, like this,
Mm,
like there was like three tables set up, and I'll never forget this. And they had like three short boxes. Like they'd always have comics.
really?
Yeah, and it was so, and like so and my mom was going to all her, I would go with her to all her appointments, and it used to be like I'd want to go because I wanted to kind of look through those comics, you know? And that's where I found like a Destroyer Duck #1.
Wow.
I was finding like old Firestorm comics in there, and because it was all like 80s,
Yeah.
maybe some 70s, maybe some 90s, but it was mostly like older stuff. So it was stuff that I wasn't gonna find like on the stands at the time, right? And because this was mid 90s when I'm talking about. So and like George Perez Teen Titans. So like this is where like I discovered more of the older stuff, you know. So like I guess like thrift stores, like maybe I saw stuff in there, but all these comics had covers on them, and they were
Mm,
all in somewhat decent condition. Like I mean, I'm not I can't remember like the grade of the comics, but they were all like pretty
yeah.
well kept, you know. But yeah, I mean, I
Was it
think
like someone's private collection that they donated or?
I know I think all of this stuff was donated. So because they would have different
Okay.
things. So I think that I'm what I can only assume is that people would like bring stuff, you know, like they donate to the hospital because I mean they would sell it. It wasn't like free, so you'd have to, obviously you're paying for it, right? But it was like $1 a comic, if that. I think like
Yeah.
it was very cheap. I think it was just to kind of, I don't know what the fuck it was for actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of weird that the hospital just in the middle of like this like waiting type area, there was like three tables set up with like used stuff. But I
Yeah.
mean, whatever, you know. But
You
yeah,
got
I
to have
think
something to read in the lounge. I
yeah,
mean, that's preferable to the 30-year-old copy of Life magazine or whatever they'd have lying around.
yeah, that's for damn sure. But I do think like it was an interesting time, you know, like that, like even that era, like when it was so much more readily available in terms of, you know, people being able to find a comic. And then like
Yeah.
obviously like I didn't know there was a thing called a comic book store until like 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years of me reading comics. And there was a lot of stores at that time. I just didn't know because I was a kid. I'm just seeing them
Hey,
at the store. But like when do you like, because you talked about the library, and I think that's important too, is like the library didn't always used to have a lot of comics, at least from our
no.
younger years. But now, I mean, obviously now they have a much larger selection. But what was that like, kind of discovering stuff that's not superheroes?
It was kind of a light bulb moment of, oh, you can do anything with this. These are like movies.
Mhm.
Because that was kind of what started my interest kind of waning in it was, when you don't really have a comic shop or anyone that knows that much about comics around you, you kind of only see Marvel and DC stuff and maybe some Image stuff. But at that point, Image is Spawn, Savage Dragon,
Yeah.
whatever Rob Liefeld's doing that week, which is still very much in the superhero vein. Yeah, when you kind of go and see of course, it's the graphic novels section. They're not comic books. These
Mhm.
are literary merit items. I remember reading The Crow, before I
Yeah.
saw the movie. Like I didn't catch it on TV as a kid or anything. And up until I read the comic, I thought, well, this looks a little goofy. Like I'm not into the goth thing, and he's got leather pants and looks like the wrestler. And then of course you read the comic and you go, wow, this is amazing. I need to go see this movie. And then the movie's a little disappointing in comparison, really, but an enjoyable flick.
I had it in the
Uh,
reverse. I saw the movie before. I think I was like
oh,
eight.
really?
I think I was like 8 or 9 when I watched that movie, and then I didn't even know it was comic book. But yeah, go continue.
So I think that is the interesting thing with some of that stuff because I had that version of a Tank Girl. No idea it was a comic, but liked the movie.
Mhm.
And then yeah, you stumble across something that has Tank Girl in it. So it was between stuff you'd find in the library, which also that's where I found American Splendor, which blew my socks off because you pull it down and it's bigger format, like kind of a Rolling Stone magazine size. And I was flipping through it. Now, but at that point, a lot of the black and white stuff I'd seen would be like Brian Michael Bendis's Powers, Jack Staff, The Crow, Turtles. So it's even though it's not necessarily superhero, you start to associate black and white with okay, it's going to be more gritty and have
Mhm.
some of this stuff, and then you read American Splendor, And I think I got about 15 pages into the first story, I flipped to. It's like, oh, okay. So it doesn't turn out that he's got powers or he's a serial killer or anything. He's just going to get groceries. And then the other thing I discovered about the same time was manga, because that had started to explode because you got that across all of the bookstores. The first one I remember really getting into was Battle Royale.
Oh, I love that. I've seen
And
see, I've
that
seen the movie. I haven't read the manga.
I've read the novel, I've read the manga. I like the movie, honestly, I think is the best because it actually captures the humor in it
Uh,
and the comedy, because it's kind of it knows it's silly as the
yeah.
movie. The novel, it's good, but it's about 800 pages, and my interest starts to kind of wane with that stuff where I have to keep track of these characters' interactions with one another. And I think if I'd read it in high school, I'd have probably liked it. But the manga is gratuitously violent, and it's drawn in that kind of traditional, I forget the term, but not shonen, the older, like 16 to 20-year-old manga
Mhm.
age range target. And so you still have the kind of contemporary, slightly cartoony figures and faces, but when it's gore, it is almost shockingly realistic. Like, when his Shoujo's friend gets shot in the classroom before they go out. I remember opening it. I'm reading it in school because I'm a senior, and the teachers don't know that it's not a prose book, so I can get away with it. And I flip it open, and it's a 2-page spread of just his head being, blown apart, and viscera and spam going all over the place. Just thinking, wow. So I thought, up until that point, I think The Crow was probably the most hardcore in terms of depictions of more realistic violence. That kind of put me down the road of manga. Which of course what you can get your hands on over here is a little less than what's available in Japan, so our view of it's a bit more narrow.
Yeah, I think now it's crazy because like now, I mean, I know you're not living in the U.S., but you're originally from the U.S.
Yeah, I'm from St. Louis.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I figured that you're from there's no accent. So, but anyways, yeah, like manga, like is something that for such a long time, I don't know why, but I just never read. Like I always was
Yeah,
like, I gotta read a character. Like I've watched anime, like, and I was never really super into it, but like my buddy in like high school, he's like, you gotta watch Akira. And I was like, oh, this is really dope. But I didn't read the manga, and I was already super into comics. And then Cowboy Bebop, he got me into. And
yeah.
and then Battle Royale, the movie, but I never read the manga stuff until I think I didn't even maybe like 2019. I think was
Mm.
like so it was like a long time. I just didn't read it. And a buddy of mine, I'm like, show me, dude, show me some good stuff. And and then it just blew me away, dude. I'm like, why have I waited this long to read this stuff?
So
Because it is
was it the format, just the act of reading in reverse, or
it
was
doesn't
it?
it didn't bother. I just didn't. I guess
Huh,
nobody that I knew or that I was friends with ever talked about anything, So I was like,
right.
I it wasn't
Yeah, you
something
don't
that
know what to check out.
exactly. So like now, I started working at the shop. My buddy and I were talking, and I was putting stuff away, and I'm like, what should I read? And he gave me Naoki Urasawa stuff. Gave me Monster. He
Yeah.
gave me 20th Century Boys. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? I'm like, why didn't you tell me about this stuff years ago? Like you've known me for a long time. What? He's like, you never asked. I'm like, so like I've fallen down this like rabbit hole of like where like that's kind of been my goal this year is to read more manga and kind of like cover, especially covering it on the channel. Like I don't have any manga coverage, but it is interesting, like you talking about like the gratuitous violence and like the level of detail that they put into it. And it's like it is nuts how much detail
Yeah,
you see in manga that you don't, and they pump it out so quick. That's what's
that's the
crazy.
fascinating thing, is that there's I've watched a few, like, not even documentaries because it's not film like, but little things about how manga is produced. And you have that assembly line method. It's the old school studio system. So the guy whose name on it, he'll draw the faces. And then you have the guy who comes in and draws the guns, and then it gets slid to the guy who does the backgrounds. I wonder what you could do, like what you could do with that method in American comics. But I think there's not necessarily too much ego at play, but you'd have to have a lot of people willing to sort of go underneath an umbrella, which prevents it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look
But
at manga, they have one creator's name, they don't have
yeah,
20 people or whatever, so I think there probably is a little bit of ego. Yeah, it's just a completely different system. It's kind of interesting, but it's like it's so readily available now. Like it's at Target. Target has a manga
yeah,
section here, and it's just
yeah.
it blows me away when we can't get into the comic shop I work at because it's back ordered, but yet Target has a fucking shelf full of it, like multiple volumes of stuff. And it's really great. I mean, they don't have American comics, but they have that,
Yeah.
so it's
Well, and that's
interesting.
what's interesting about that is that it's it has a completely different connotation than if you tell someone, "Oh, I read comics."
Yeah.
Yeah, they immediately picture something. Let's be honest, a little milk toast, PG-13,
Yeah.
safe for the whole family.
Mm-hmm.
But manga, if you tell your grandmother, "Oh, I'm reading manga," she has no idea what that is. So if she goes to the store, or they have rating systems, but no one looks at that,
No.
because A, it makes no sense, and B, each company has their own rating system on their own book, so it's completely superfluous.
Yeah.
But one of the things that tickles me pink is to go into over here. There's a more chain type comic shop, and they have a massive wall of manga, of course, but they unwrap all of it. So some of it's stuff that would be wrapped up just to preserve its crisp corners, and it's an all ages kind of. Pokemon was one of the ones that was wrapped up that they unwrapped. But then you'll have these smaller companies that popped up that buy the rights to publish in English, and it's really hardcore adult stuff. Like the two that were right next to each other that I kind of just looked at and loved it was something very shonen, not quite Dragon Ball Z, but one of those like Bleach maybe.
Okay.
One of those where when the manga's on the shelf, it's about as wide as a truck because there's so many volumes.
Yeah.
And then right before it was called something like you know Black Abyss or something like that with kind of a death metal font. Okay, I'm curious. Flip it over on the back, it's unwrapped, and it's a total etchy demon succubus dominatrix kind of. I don't know if it's a romantic comedy or whatever, but it's worth opening a flip, and it's full on like pornographic, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Just because though it's not in a comic book size, it kind of gets looked over, and there's something seductive about that tankobon size that people are just okay with and don't think to flip through. I don't know. I'd like to see that kind of adapted in the US, because I think that's also one of the things that holds back American comics being thought of as a little higher. Not necessarily stuff like Fantagraphics, Dark Horse, or Image, but Marvel and DC. If you were to chop it down, because of course the price point is a big thing. Manga, a volume of that's so like what, $8.99 when I was buying it in high school. So I'm sure it's still probably about $10.
About 10 to 12. I mean, I think like maybe like the newest Bleach reprint was like $14.99, but still, I mean, compared to or no, I think maybe like the 3-in-1s are like 20, and those things are
yeah, I've seen those where it's like 3 tankobons as one big omnibus, and then that's still like $20.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like you're getting a better deal, and the stories are much more compressed. But that's a whole other conversation on the mechanics of storytelling.
I mean, yeah, we could go on and on about this. So let me steer this back to what we're talking about. So how did you, or not how, but like when did you decide you wanted to create your own comics? Like when did that start?
I took art classes in high school. I really liked painting. I've done that off and on, and I like telling stories, but I never felt comfortable with my art. So then I moved on to filmmaking and writing scripts and prose stories, and making some shorts and stuff like that. And then I had made the last short I made was just such a you're working with people. You've got actors, you've got people who are helping with behind the camera, and so everyone's got to be there at the same time, and you're just trying to tell this story and bring it to life. And that was kind of the sort of thing where I was like, I don't want to do this again, like, because you're not doing it for money. The Oscars are not going to come calling to watch my splat stick goofball 30-minute comedy. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll try drawing one of these. And so I went and pulled out a few ideas I had and jotted them down and went from there. And the first stuff published, I think it even says in the Not Spawn thing, like the first Not Spawn, the number 0 strip, like that was the second comic I did. And Not Spawn was an idea I'd had for years and years and years of just this Napoleon. I call him Napoleon Dynamite meets Casey Jones but more like he's just a douchebag who fully believes he's a hero, but really he's just a goofus running around in a bad costume with a machete, stalking women because he expects that Spider-Man scene, the upside down kiss that never comes to him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really dug this Not Spawn. Like I think I like these type of books where like I mean like the kayfabe channel calls it dojinshi, like what I mean, like that's a term like I didn't know about, but just like watching people, because obviously you can't make a ton of money doing these things because you have to be careful, right? Like when you're using other characters. But I don't know, I've always liked these kind of like spoofs on stuff. I mean, to me it's like kind of in the vein of, like you said, Mad Magazine, like when you talk about like being kind of influence. So like so Not Spawn, some of the first stuff you did, because I mean this is a more recent release though.
Last year it was serialized in 2-page bursts in Know Nothing magazine, which is a zine that I've been lucky enough to be part of since the 3rd issue. They published originally prose stories that I did, and then when I decided, you know what, I want to try doing comics, I actually tried to get an artist to draw my stuff.
Okay.
And that kind of circled around and became the exact same experience of trying to get people together to make a film, which I think it was probably about the 3rd person who, no disrespect or anything given, but that sort of thing where they obviously are working on their own stuff. And one of the guys was just like, just draw it yourself. Can't really draw. Like I never figured out how to render a perfect human form. But that, of course, I started to really think about the art that I like, which would be the Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Beavis and Butthead, and then this Japanese, this whole sector of manga that doesn't really kind of come over to the West called Heita Uma, which translates to bad good. And so it's usually stuff like that, like a hand might have 7 fingers or the face might look a little wonky, but it gives it a sort of like punk rock attitude,
right?
Which is ironically now what I'm trying to hold on to, because I've been gobbling up various books on cartooning, just working on stuff like, at least the hallmarks of a good form really are symmetry and knowing where the bends are and stuff. But now I've kind of circled back where it's like, you know what? I kind of miss this. So now I'll purposely, when I'm drawing a hand, I'll just go at it real quick and, have like 2 pinkies that kind of bend at a weird angle, or, a knee move or a leg bends the way it shouldn't, or has 2 extra ankles, just because it kind of makes you go,
no, I like that kind of stuff, dude. I mean, I dug the Not Spawn book, and like I don't know how I found out about these, but I was super, like, I'm a huge Turtles fan. I mean, I'm assuming
everyone that I mailed them copies, but also the PDF is completely, everyone has a copy that was in it.
Okay.
So my dream for that was to just have everyone print up their own copies, so you could actually get different versions of it that are resized. The guy who gave them to cartoonist kayfabe, Ben Cherry, he actually printed them up in batches of 4, where the covers are, the color of the headbands.
Oh, okay.
Whereas, because I have access over here, luminescent paper, the print shop has a big bulk thing of luminescent paper that they bought for someone and have never used, and I saw it on the back shelf, and they've still got plenty of it, but that's, the versions I have. And then, there's another guy who just straight up prints them out of his printer, like old school black and white zines. So you can get a different version of it from everyone that has done it. You were saying something about you were a big fan of the
Oh
Turtles.
yeah, I'm a huge Turtles fan. So I don't know how I think I'm pretty sure I had to have seen it on the Kayfabe channel. Like I absolutely huge Turtles heads from a kid, the cartoon, and then discovering the comics like later
Yeah.
on. Like I didn't know they were a comic book first, and
So
like getting
how did you get your first comic, and which one was it? Because if it's the original run, that's back when every issue was a different creator for the most part.
okay. Well, the way I obviously the Archie ones were probably the ones that I had first from based on
Sure.
the cartoon. But when I discovered it, it was at a shop that was like my local shop and stuff, and it was right before, or I think it might have even been while I was working there, because I obviously illegally, because you're not supposed to work before you're fucking 16. But I was flipping through like in the kids section, moving stuff around, and I was like, oh, there's some Archie turtles, and I saw like I was flipping, and all of a sudden I see like these old ones, and I found in that pile the fourth printing of number one. And I got it for cover price. It said $1.50 on
Really?
there, and that's how much I got it for. It was definitely, there's no way it was worth that even at that time, because this is the early
No.
2000s, maybe 2000, maybe 2001. And I remember taking it home and I read it and I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is not Ninja Turtles. And I'm like, and then I remember I'm like, well, this feels more like the movie, like it's a little bit
Yeah.
darker. And I fell down the rabbit hole, dude. And I have an almost complete run of that because I started like gobbling them up. I got whatever I had at that shop, and then I went online and like obviously they're a lot more expensive now than what I was buying them
Yeah.
for. But yeah, like I fell in love, dude. Like the Ninja Turtles comics are probably some of my favorite that I've read multiple times. I have multiple formats of it.
Well, and they hold up because
Yes.
each time you reread it, depending on which creator's doing that issue or a couple issues, you're going to notice stuff about that creator's flourish that you didn't catch before.
Yeah.
And that's I brought with me my last time back home. I brought back all my Turtles issues, which I kind of a weird bit. I have the first seven, not first printings, obviously. And then it jumps to like 12 to 32. And then I've got the Zuli issues, and then a good bit after that. But all the ones that I'm missing are, of course, like the last 10 or whatever, the City at War, the big expensive low print run ending.
Yeah.
And then just middle issues here or there. But I got them from those little toy shows they do at like VFW halls and stuff. There's a guy who'd sell comics there, and it was clearly like his collection, just trying to get rid of it. And each time I went there, he had these books, and no one's looking at them because it's all dudes looking for old Hot Wheels and stuff. But each time I noticed the price kept going down. So I waited about 3 times and milled about until the show was almost over, walked up and was like, hey, man, I'll give you this, whatever amount of cash I had on me that was a little bit less than he was charging for. I'll give it to you right now for these books. And there's that sort of like, fine, whatever. Then I don't have to load it in the car. Get out of here.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And so you luck out. But I worked at a shop for a while, and someone actually sold us the first 5 or 6 like first printings of Turtles, like including number one.
Mhm.
Like flipping through that thing, like it looks, because the first printing, it's bigger, it's chunkier, even the paper's thicker because they didn't know what they were ordering.
Right.
Like, it's wild to see it in that original size.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my holy grails, but it gets further and further away of something that I can
Yeah.
afford. Like if I would have somehow convinced my mom when I was young to get me that first printing, I could have got it for probably thousands of
Yeah.
dollars less, because like it wasn't like, it was a little expensive, but I don't know, I feel like there was
Well,
that,
it wasn't.
sweet spot where like no Turtles things were coming out. Like it was that Image run that
Yeah.
ended, right? And then before Mirage launched Volume 4, before the 2003 cartoon. So I feel like I got them at a time where like they had kind of started like fluctuating downwards.
Yeah. Yeah, they
But
were considered a dead property.
yeah. But so let's talk
That
about like, is this something that was your idea? Like how did this project come about?
I wanted to do something that had like a punching. My idea was basically to do a Wu-Tang Clan thing, where their intention was to get together, do that one record, Enter the 36th Chamber, something that would have wider appeal. It's got all their names on it, rising tide raises all ships kind of thing, and then disperse. And I had read Nate Grixley's Wolverine. It's Wolverine, but he's just a sad drunk.
Okay.
And
I haven't heard of that.
It's pretty funny. It's worth checking out. He's presented as being kind of it's if the Jim Lee Wolverine aged in real time and had a beer gut.
Okay.
So he's got stubbly chain smokes. But now he's just kind of a doofus. I really, really loved that first run of Turtles where different creators did their own thing. And so you got to see all these different stories. Some of them were really poignant. Some of them were funny. Some of them, were lavished with more ink on the page than not. Some of them were really loose and cartoony. And so, the original theme, I forget what I called the pitch, but it was like adult midlife crisis turtles or something, not near as punchy as the title would become. And I just put a thing on Instagram, a handwritten note like, hey, I'm doing this. You'll get 3 comp copies for your time and then the PDF. And I expected to get enough people to maybe do a 48-page one with a 4-page max per person. And people just kept messaging me and I kept saying yes, because I didn't think to sit down with a bit of paper and find out how many pages. So it became an 80-page, I think it was 84 pages. But the print shop I go to, at least their thing tops out at 60.
Okay.
So that's why it's 2 volumes, is there's just no physical way, because I don't want to go to, one of those more professional type mail service things.
Yeah.
Partially because I don't like that aesthetic for small print run stuff. I like that grimy kind of punk rock feel of it looks fresh off the photocopier, where, it might have been made by some goblin hanging out in his basement smoking pot and drinking PBR for all you know. And so that's the look and the feel I wanted. People came out in droves to be a part of it, and every story in there is great. My personal favorite is the one by John Lukanoff with Cerebus. I think it's in the first volume. It's the one that has just one of those times where you audibly like just start laughing at a comic, where the girl is going down on him, on Raphael, and he's now this fat, portly, gross older turtle, and he's eating pizza while she's doing it, and he just goes, pepperoni. And there's just this speech bubble, that you don't see coming from her, that just says, my name's Patricia. It's such a stupid gag. It just makes me laugh, because that kind of is what the original Turtles was about to me, where you could get serious commentary, or at least something that roots it more in real life. Like there's the one where forget which one, but one of them becomes a QAnon fanatic and is actually at the January 6th riot.
Yeah.
And then there's another one where, was it Donatello blows his brains out because he realizes how dysfunctional his family is, and that one isn't very funny. And it's drawn by Mike Ford is the guy's name that did that one, and he actually drew it. I'm sure you caught it, so it looks like the old cartoon from when we were kids.
Yeah,
which makes it actually way more tragic and full of sorrow to draw it like a kid's cartoon than even draw it like the comics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that throughout these 2 volumes, like it goes from like dark, funny, like, and all the cartoonists in here are like super talented. And you could tell like everybody loves Turtles.
Yeah.
Like they're spoofing on them, like, or they're putting them in situations that you wouldn't normally see them in. But
yeah,
I loved every single one of these.
Every one of them kind of oozes like love for the source material, which was, the chief important thing to me.
Like I like the one with the kid too, like at the end, it's the kid running and he's playing with all the toys, like that. that like even like making like a building out of a box. I remember doing that,
Yeah,
with my toys. So it was cool to kind of see something like that as well.
that that one was interesting because the guy who did it is, I think, older than you or I by a few years, because he was saying he never even watched the cartoon. Like he was
Oh
a bit old
wow.
for that, so
Okay.
he was on to the comics. He sent me it as a 3-page thing with, that middle bit being one big fold out, and I just format this stuff on my phone. I have like a scanner app, and it converts it to a PDF. So I'm not very tech adept. I think I tried doing one thing with one of the not spawn pages on a Photoshop type thing, and did a cranky old man thing, right? I don't know what I'm doing. Just turn it off, whatever. Oh, it was I wanted to correct some lettering. So there's a not spawn where if you look closely, you can see where I just taped a speech bubble
Yeah.
over over it, and that's what that is. But yeah, we kind of spent about a week trying to figure out how to do that collectively before he forget how he did it, but he just chopped it in half and sent me the pages. And then I keep thinking about, I probably have to do it at some point, but publishing just as a small 1 sheet 8-page tiny mini comic, my original strip for Washed Up Turtles,
Hmm.
because I kind of soured on it because it would have made it to the book an odd length. And I think I just at that point was like, nope, I'm just gonna chop it. I got to get this thing done. The stress of getting books to people who were kindly enough to give you their
Yeah.
time and hard work. But my original one is, it still follows the same way where Shredder kills the turtles. He's one, and it's the Inigo Montoya thing and the Princess Bride of like, I don't know what to do now.
Yeah.
And so he goes down, lives in the sewer, and starts playing with toys to relive his thing. But it was going to keep going, where you see how the city evolves and moves around him, and the Foot Clan becomes, just this kind of memory, and everything he stood for, the battles, like no one even remembers it. And it was going to end with him in a nursing home and just kind of babbling incoherently to himself and having on his lap the turtles battle van.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to just sort of like push it off the table, smile and drool, and then just end with a as he shits his pants. Like,
Yeah, you
just
need to
so,
release that. You need to do that.
it's so stupid. But I thought it does make me laugh because of how stupid it is. But I like playing with that kind of thing. That's probably a big through line, as you've seen with any of my stuff, is that either people get what they want and suffer for it, or they never do. And I really like to have them get it and suffer for it, because I think there's enough stories where people get what they want and live happily ever after. Although,
Yeah, no,
did
for
I
sure.
send you my the new book that's coming out this month, the
No, no.
Trump book?
No, I haven't got that.
Oh, I'll have to email it to you. The best way I can think to explain it is it's canon. It's Death Wish 3, but with QAnon. And I actually worked with a colorist on it, Macy. And so the way we've done it is the the plot is just it's as I said, it's Death with Wish 3 with QAnon stuff. So the bookends for it that she did is actual collage photos. And the first part, when you open it, it's Trump running up to Todd McFarlane outside a cafe, going, "I've got a new comic Image should publish," and then giving it to him, forcing him to read it, and then you, the reader, read the comic. And it's just bonkers, insane, stupid, gross out stuff, ranging from is you can curse on this and
Yeah,
stuff,
you
can't
can.
you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I went full bore with amusing every gross impulse I had, going beyond the Mad Magazine influence. So like the second page is the giant Q symbol, which looks like Zordon from Power Rangers. Tells Trump he has to go fight these Antifa ninjas who want to put gay chemicals in the water supply of Independence, Missouri, and he's got to go fight them. And so he looks at his daughter and says, "Come here and give Daddy some good luck, sugar." And their tongues are interlaced, like I drew it almost imagining as just like two cylinders, so they're prehensile and there's drool. Of course, Joe Biden is the big bad on top of the Jewish space laser. They are also eating babies and drinking baby blood because that's something they do apparently. I went down a rabbit hole, and that
I
my
gotta.
YouTube algorithm is completely fucked at this point because I've watched so much QAnon stuff when I was making notes for this that that's just now what I get recommended. It's either that or what was it that came up that amused me? So there was like some sort of far right thing about woke Oscars, which I could care less about.
Yeah.
Something to do with the something else similar, and then the third one was like Black Flag Live 1982. Like
It's so funny that you said
the,
that about YouTube algorithm because I had to create a different like a different YouTube or with a different email attached because my daughter kept going on and I kept getting all these like unwrapping videos of like toys and like Barbies. I'm like, no, I can't have this shit popping up on my YouTube. So here, you log into this one.
yeah, it never occurred to me that like was something that really happened because of course you just look at what you normally look at, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
all it takes is like one thing that you randomly click on or pops into your head, and then it's all messed up.
But so what so you got that book, like what else, because like I have these ones where it's the turtles and the not spawn stuff, but like what other comics can like people kind of pick up from you? Can you kind of talk about some of the other books we can get from you?
So I've got a 5-volume anthology with a lot of the people who are in Turtles called Tales for the Toilet,
Mm-hmm.
which the first one was me and two other guys, and then it kind of kept adding and adding to it. The fourth volume and the fifth volume are probably the strongest, or at least the ones I would recommend checking out first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole thing it's all in the title. It's goofy, short, stupid stories. You leave it next to your bathroom and you read it while you're pooping.
Mm-hmm.
And like the fourth one is themed after manga, so everyone was just riffing on their favorite manga or something to do with manga themes. Five was horror and features a beautiful color cover, the only color cover to exist on the thing, by Alex Turbin. I've got Snazzy Thrills, which I'm trying to put out monthly, and that's just kind of compiling old strips from other zines that I submit to, or minis that I'll go and I'll print up a batch of 40 and just stick them in a mailer when
Mm-hmm.
people order stuff. And then I never reprint that, so that just goes in there. Right now, I wanted to try doing a semi daily comic strip on my Instagram. So right now, Trash Planet is ongoing, and that's got about 2 more weeks left, and it's post-apocalyptic action. The Earth is used as a dumping ground for aliens, and after a few decades, all that's left are mutants and rotting husks of cities. There's Xander Chrome, which is my love letter to action movies, and Bruce Campbell. It's the ultimate Florida man. He's got cutoffs. He's got that Casey Jones kind of midriff shirt from the cartoon, mustache, mullet, and he's got to go save Earth's babes from these evil brain aliens. That's all it is. There's nothing really deep with it. It's an excuse for action and jokes. And the dumbest or grossest one-liners I could think of, like I think that's the one that has I'm gonna use your scrotum as toilet paper.
Now all
There's
these are just on your Gumroad, right? Like you don't bring these to shops or anything. Is there any kind of shops locally to you that will carry like zines like that?
no,
No.
no. I live in a very small rural town,
Okay.
and there's really nothing here nearby. And then I've contacted a few shops around the UK. Gosh Comics, which is the big one in London, they actually have a big section for small press, but I think they rotated out pretty quickly.
Okay.
And they had carried Turtles, but I think they get inundated with so many creators that they don't really know what to do, because it is kind of a niche thing,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. But for the most part, I just promote it online. My goal at some point, I say this year, but the year is of course quickly slipping away, being that we're in mid-March, is to do a local convention or something. Just because I'd like to do that once. I figure that's something you got to try. Newcastle Comics in St. Louis and in Colorado also has copies of Turtles. Yeah, there's a few shops. Basically, I'll just hit up shops on Instagram. Like if I see them advertising in Bubbles fanzine, or they come up on Instagram, I'm not too shy about messaging them, going, "Hey, I make this. You know, will you carry it?" And
Yeah.
sometimes they say yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know, like, I feel like there's just not enough shops that do that. I think that, I mean, obviously, like, it's cool to get it direct from like the person too, but it is, I liked when I see shops. Like there was a store in Portland that I went to a few years ago when I was there that has this whole section of like just local creators, and then I'm sure stuff that maybe like yourself, like you call and they'll carry it, but just like all these zines, and I could have spent a long time in that shop, but my wife was with me and she's not about comics, so
Yeah,
I had to like kind of like peruse it real quick. But I think it's cool to see this kind of stuff, this kind of like you called it, like punk rock way of making comics. Like you're not going to like some like big printer or doing some big print run. Like you're printing them up yourself, either making them at home or going to like a place that prints up
yeah,
a few of them. So I definitely like that aspect of comic book making. That's something that I didn't really pay attention to up until like a few years ago, because I just didn't know, like I didn't know that it
yeah,
was there.
yeah. I'm trying to. My goal or pipe dream is that I'm trying to think about ways to court people who would easily be into, something like the Turtles or even Xander Chrome, just something goofy, or not even just my stuff, but small press comics in general, because they have a wider appeal than mainstream comics, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Just being that it covers many more different subjects. I'd like to try to get it into stuff like tattoo shops, craft beer bars, barber shops, cafes. And of course, with some of that stuff, like cafes, it couldn't be too blue. But I've got something going on right now that I'm writing that could be, PG-13. I'm not forcefully trying to rein in my impulses, but it's
Mm-hmm.
a story that doesn't necessarily require a lot of gratuitousness.
Mm-hmm.
And something like that, where all it costs me is $20, print up, 15 copies, 5 to this cafe, 5 to this cafe, 5 to this cafe, and not even having them sell it, but it's just free for people to read.
Yeah,
You
that's
put
a good idea.
your it's make it like a business card.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your Instagram and whatever on the back with your creator bio, and then the rest of it is just a story that someone can pick up, read in 10 minutes, and think, "Oh, I kind of like that. I want to see what more is going on like this." I want to, yeah, just try to put out the good word a bit more about small press stuff, because even with people that are into comics, some of the kids I've worked with at older jobs, that they like Marvel, they like DC, but they don't really know about what else is beyond that, because largely in the West, our conception of comics is it's going to have superheroes in it.
Yeah.
And so I think if you can court people who aren't necessarily into superheroes but could be into the visual medium, you can probably find some outside venues for it. I have no idea how it went, but there's a metal band in Scotland that, I forget if they messaged me or I messaged them, but I sent them a big batch of one of my little one sheet that you fold into an 8-page mini things called a Sad Boy Skullbro, which it's the Punisher, but on his chest it's the skull with a tear, and just for 8 pages it's him like punching someone's head up with an uppercut and then ripping some guy's heart out, and then at the end it just says something like, "No matter how many holes I put in the bad guys, I'll never fix the hole in my heart." And just something like that, free. I think it cost me $5 to print up 100 of them.
Yeah.
It's more sweat equity to fold them than it is to make it, and you can just give them away as little tasters.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's definitely a cool, interesting way to kind of get your stuff out there too. Like that's, pretty cost effective. It's not costing you much, like you said. It's like a business card.
It's something also that I think it has the appeal, especially zines or doujinshi or whatever you want to call small press comics. I really would like to have this sort of not a movement or anything as cheesy as that, but people see that and go, oh, okay, so you don't have to be a perfect artist, and you actually start getting this influx of non-art school people, non people who grew up obsessed with comics, like someone who my dream would be to have someone who goes to work, they work at a McDonald's or something. They're like, you know what? I've got a funny thing. Get a piece of paper, fold it, there's my thing. And we get more stuff like that, where it doesn't have this obsession of form and formalism, and we get more experimental.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of room for that, and I think that it's something that I've really enjoyed like discovering over the past few years, like people like yourself, a lot of the guys that are like in the Cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats group on Facebook. I don't know if you're familiar with that. A lot
Yeah,
of these like self-published guys, these indie guys are just like it's a nice change from just going like don't get me wrong, I read Marvel and DC and I read like the
yeah.
stuff that comes out, but I like this stuff too. I like seeing stuff like this, because there's just a different type of energy that comes off the page when people are making it in this way. So before we kind of like wrap up, is there anything else that you are currently working on or that you want to like shout out? And I'm going to also where people can find your stuff online, and I'm going to drop those links.
So I've got strips appear pretty regularly in Spread Love Zine. I think that's at Spread Love Comics on Instagram. Know Nothing Magazine at Know Nothing Mag. Right now, I'm serializing a story called Hollywood Ripper, which is 30s style rubber hose cartoon creatures like Looney Tunes, but in a story that is kind of a mix of Sleepless in Seattle and Ichi the Killer. It's a sociopath is running around Hollywood hacking people to bits, and the assassin called in to take care of him falls in love, based only on the scene of the crime, the splatter, and the passion put into it. There's a Saturday Morning Comics zine coming out shortly from Matt Chi at Matt Chi. I'm doing an Earthworm Jim story.
Hell yeah.
I just gave him the Turtles treatment. He's not in video games anymore. What's old Jim up to? I've got the Trump comic coming out this month. The final touches are being put on it, which if you've got a strong stomach and like political satire, I think it's probably the funniest thing I've ever drawn. And the colorist, Macy, has blown it out of the water, because it kind of became a competitive thing where I would give her these black and white pages, and the only color in it is red, white, and blue, except for his hair, which is golden yellow. But the page that made me seethe with just that jealous competitiveness of like, God damn, that is so good, is there's a part where a Proud Boy has to suck the venom out of Trump's penis after he's been poisoned. And as he ejaculates, it's a close up on his face and just like this creepy smile. And what she did was, over that, in all the negative space, there's the moon landing, the American flag, the Twin Towers crying, and several other things. And then his little, in the flecks of his eye, there's even tiny, tiny American flags. I think that's probably my favorite thing that I've been a part of, even if she completely outdid me at every turn. And then Snazzy Thrills, I put out. The goal is every month, because I've got enough material laying around to do it. Everything I do is kind of similar in that it's probably going to be comedic and little gross, little splat stick. Call it Sam Raimi meets Mad Magazine. and everything that's available on my Gumroad. And if anyone makes anything, music, art, makes any sort of physical thing, I always prefer trade over a purchase. I can easily be swayed with a vinyl record, a cassette, a comic, whatever anyone has.
All right, cool, man. Yeah, I'll drop all those links down below, and like you guys definitely got to go check his stuff out. I know I have to get some of the other books that I saw on your Gumroad when I was looking last night. Definitely want to check all that stuff out. Definitely want to read that Trump comic too. And
I'll send it to you.
oh, thank you, dude. And thank you so much for doing this, dude. Like I really dig what you're doing, and it's been a blast talking comics with you, dude.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, dude. We'll do this again sometime in the future too.
Sounds good.